Hi folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about movies, music, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the debut album from Odd Future member Earl Sweatshirt, the album titled Doris. I have a bit of an odd relationship with Odd Future. Now keep in mind, it's not like I dislike any of the associated acts, because for the most part, from what I've seen of Tyler the Creator and Frank Ocean, I've liked what I've seen. Hell, I was on the cusp of reviewing Channel Orange last year, arguably one of the best albums to come out in 2012. But I didn't review Channel Orange, and I probably never will. Mostly because it represents a bit of a strange problem I have when approaching Odd Future associated acts. I have no idea on earth how I'm supposed to feel about them. Let me try to explain this, because it doesn't make a lot of sense, even to me. For starters, as good as Tyler the Creator can be, I'm not quite sure whether or not I should buy into the exaggerated elements of his persona or treat them as almost a parody. There's something strange about the way he delivers his lines that's very much unlike Hobson or Eminem, who are straightforward and direct in their assaults. Tyler the Creator seems oddly comfortable in the way he goes to shock, and once you get your brain on the same wavelength, he lacks the same ability to surprise me. It's not even that I don't doubt that said things that he's saying are actually true or real things that he's saying, but I'm not sure how I'm supposed to react to them, which adds that extra second where I pause to think about that, which kind of stifles my enjoyment of all of his material. I definitely appreciate the raw or rougher production on his beats, but too often his flow does nothing to really engage me, and his content just seems to feel strangely distant. Frank Ocean also tends to feel distant and isolated, but then again, that was half of the point with Channel Orange, most of which I remember listening to in a spaced out haze of heat exhaustion wandering through the woods outside my parents' house. I'd argue that sensory overload alone, Channel Orange is an incredible success, which really does a disservice to the lyrics, which contain some of the most incredibly descriptive, cripplingly honest poetry put on record in a long time. Coupled with the fact that Channel Orange had plenty to say about the state of modern youth, sexuality, faith, and love, and I'm not surprised at all that people fell in love with the album. And yet, for some reason, it never truly landed with me beyond a few songs. It's not now my return to time and time again, and for the life of me, I don't really understand why. I want to love it, I really do, but yet I feel distant from it, unable to truly connect. Part of it feels that, like for so much of Channel Orange, feels alternatively very personal and then very disconnected from everyone. A bit of a passive observer in his own life. And strangely, I feel the same thing with Tyler the Creator as well, even despite he and Frank Ocean's wildly different deliveries and choices of subject matter. For as much as they try to engage you and invest you in personal stories, there always seems to be that separation. And while it might make for impeccable and effective artistic framing, it could also make for a bit of an odd listening experience that might have kept me away for most of this past year. So will the same be true of Earl Sweatshirt, the oft-absent member of Odd Future who has finally released his debut studio album Doris? Will this be the Odd Future member I finally connect with, or the first I must unfortunately consign to the trash? Well, I wouldn't quite say either of those, per se. And while Earl Sweatshirt's Doris is indeed a good, possibly even a great album, I do feel it suffers from the exact same problems I have with the rest of Odd Future's work, and thus it doesn't quite stick with me in the same way. I really wanted to love this album. I really did. But in the end, the most I can say is that it's an extremely solid album that just doesn't work for me. And you have no idea how frustrating this is, because on the surface, Earl Sweatshirt does nearly everything I like in a rapper. His instrumentation and production is creative, gritty, and incredibly organic, with very few of his beats truly blowing my mind, but all of them working in service of conveying the mood and tone of the song perfectly. You get your spots of trap instrumentation, but where ASAP Ferg made all the wrong choices, infusing it with the typical Cash Money hose raps, Earl Sweatshirt is smart enough to pair it with choices in subject matter and delivery, often in taking the tracks in very dark directions, that do wonders for the atmosphere. And it's a testament to how good the beats are that I am left wanting more at the end of every single track. Of course, this comes back to the rapping itself. And while I will say it did take me a bit of time to get accustomed to Earl Sweatshirt's slower, more methodical flow, it definitely became enough on its own to carry many of the tracks on the album despite the excess of guest stars. If I'm going to criticize Earl Sweatshirt's flow and delivery a little bit, I will say that his low-key, quieter voice doesn't quite make him stand out initially amongst his peers. But then again, that's the same problem I've had with nearly all the mixtapes and albums from Odd Future with all of their members. And It's this serious lack of energy and driving momentum. It really doesn't help matters that there are very few hooks or upbeat instrumental cadences on Doris, which lead to a series of raps from the various members just piling up on each track, with maybe a bit of a transition between verses but not much of one. I won't precisely say that it's a bad thing, but I can't say I'm really much of a fan of it. Sure, these lack of hooks make it very clear this is a rapper's album first and foremost, but it can also make some of the verses and songs feel distinctly unfocused or a little unfinished, which is a complaint I'll level at the entire album. If anything, this album feels very much like a mixtape. A lot of intense, intricate, dense wordplay, but lacking any real focus to bring it all together into a cohesive whole. But let me say this, it definitely goes a long way on the strength of that wordplay alone, let me tell you that. I can't say that Earl Sweatshirt or any of his guest stars won me over completely on this album, but I was definitely impressed by the sheer technical wordplay on this album across the board. Now, there are a few glaring mistakes at points from various rappers, but nothing critical and nothing that isn't forgivable for a rapper's debut. And there's definitely real talent on display here. And as I've said before, there are nuggets of brilliant wordplay and concepts here, where Earl Sweatshirt brings a surprising amount of emotion through on his tracks, nailing that human balance that Tyler the Creator still seems to struggle with on occasion. Earl Sweatshirt talks about how being the son of a poet has led to expectations forced upon him on Burgundy, and that while he tries to be hard and hate his absent father, he still misses the man and wishes he could be part of his life. Like J. Cole before him, Earl Sweatshirt seems to be a lot smarter and a little bit more educated than most of his fellows, but he's also aware that his education ostracizes him and isolates him from his community more than it can actually help him. And on songs like Hive, he spares no words delving into the cyclic and self-destructive attitudes within the hood community. And like Childish Gambino before him, he doesn't shy away from mentioning his feelings being caught between the black world and the white world. He has his darker fantasies, to be sure, they're all over the album, but since they don't feel as cavalier as Tyler the Creator's, they land with significantly more impact. In other words, Earl Sweatshirt seems to toe the line between Frank Ocean and Tyler the Creator, and more often than not, he just rises past them both. And yet, this album feels unfocused. Even despite the brilliant verses, they feel like a set of pieces that haven't yet truly been assembled into a meaty, effective whole. But even if we consider tracks individually, there are very few that feel complete on their own, or that couldn't be improved by a stronger driving hook or a few more bars or another verse. Some critics have said the album feels long, and I can definitely see that, but that's more due to Earl Sweatshirt's low-key delivery and the darker beats than anything else. Adding more to make the songs a little bit more cohesive could only strengthen the album as a whole, not weaken it. But even with those problems that I mentioned, I would still recommend Earl Sweatshirt's debut album, Doris. As a display of pure wordsmanship, it's phenomenal. The combined works of a rap collective and one guy in particular that have repeatedly shown to have a deep talent pool and something interesting to say. As a rapper, Earl Sweatshirt has a ton of technical skill and a lot of interesting subject matter to broach, and his instrumentation is tight and solid across the board. And if this album had the focus to be more than just a collection of very strong verses, it could easily be in convention for one of the best albums of the year. As it is, it's still very, very good, but not quite amazing. And yet that's still enough for me to recommend it. Check out Doris by Earl Sweatshirt. You won't regret it. So yeah, if you'd like to like and subscribe, I got one more review, the new Franz Ferdinand album, before I go on vacation. No, I'm not going to be reviewing Avenged Sevenfold, because nobody cares about Avenged Sevenfold. See you next time.